Babylon's Fall. Where do we even start? Oh, I guess we'll start saying thank you Square Enix for sending the code. But yeah, let's just dive right into it. I've got quite a bit to say to this game. So the story of Babylon's Fall starts off as your created character coming off a boat and being implanted with a Gideon coffer and basically becoming a new sentinel, like the people that are like trying to defend the city. So the character creation in the game is like bare bones compared to like Platinum's other games. Like for example, Astral Chain, you had a lot of options when it came to character creation. This game is pretty bare bones, and I won't lie, the colouring don't even match half the time. And I was just like, bro, this is so bad. This is 2022. How can it not match? But I'm not gonna go on to that. You've probably seen clips of it and stuff on Twitter about it already. Now the story itself is definitely not the greatest, and at the start of the game it's like very slow to the point where I can see people just easily dropping it. But I would say midway through the game to end game, it actually does pick up a bit. It becomes a bit more, a bit more anime in a sense, which like is a bit of a bad term to say, but that's like literally the only thing I can think of right now. Maybe they might continue it like with future updates and stuff, but I won't lie, the ending of the game I was slightly confused as to like what the hell was happening, you know. I was like, I didn't really get much of an explanation. It's like, yeah, here's your final boss, here's some scenes, and then boom, that was it. And I was like, now for boss battles in the game, that was like probably the strongest point of the game overall, and there's not really many strong points for this game, which is such a shame. But regardless, we'll dive into that later on. Boss battles itself in the game, they more or less run like a typical Platinum boss type fight. So bunch of orbs flying here and there, bunch of flashy effects and everything, deal a decent amount of damage, especially if you're under geared, which I'll talk about later. But I actually enjoyed myself doing those boss battles, and even like the cutscenes leading up to them and everything were actually quite nice, enjoyable. It felt like, you know, a proper story game at that point when it came to those fights. As for the difficulties for these boss fights, yeah, they're not really hard at all. Even when doing it solo, which is what I done for like the whole story of the game, none of them were hard except for the final boss, and even then it wasn't too bad. It's just the fact the final boss could like spawn clones which deal the same amount of damage the final boss is doing. So yeah, in that regard you can see why it is mainly targeted for like 4-player co-op, or at least have a duo or something, you know, to make it easier for yourself. Now they do have a Warlords update coming soon, I believe on the 7th of March, which introduces like another, I guess you could say, a raid boss in a sense. There's like a level 110 one and 151. I'll check that out. I don't think it'll be hard at all, because literally the certain builds in the game is just stupidly broken at this point already. Speaking of my previous point, playing the game solo is very possible. It's a bit more time consuming as you'll be in fights longer than usual, but it's very possible. You know, obviously you want to play with people to make it much more enjoyable, but you know, if there's not really many people there to play with, which judging by the Steam charts from I've seen, not too many sometimes, especially during certain hours of the day, then yeah, you can play the game solo. Now, how the cutscenes are presented in the game were a bit weird. It reminded me of Scarlet Nexus 1, where it was done like in a manga style, but this one was done in a painting style, which I guess with the art style in this game, it just didn't really click with me at all. They did do some like actual semi motion capture cutscenes, basically like real-time engine cutscene, I guess. Even then, it still didn't look too great. I'm really not too sure what happened in this game anyway, but that's besides the point. But yeah, I think they could have really done much better in that department. The characters that you meet in the game are not really interesting, I would say, more or less. You could easily forget about most of them. Hell, even one of them gets pretty much, I wouldn't say yeeted away, but he goes away from the story like right after the first boss, and then you see him from like 1 or 2 places, and that's pretty much it. In that regard, there is maybe like 1 or 2 characters that was somewhat interesting, but at the same time, it's probably just the writing that was done for these characters, because it definitely didn't really click with me when I was playing through the story. And usually with these type of like looter games, the stories are somewhat semi-interesting. I guess for me personally, yeah, Destiny 2 I actually enjoyed a lot more when it came to the story as well. But yeah, this game, yeah, not the greatest. Definitely not the greatest. So I'll give the story a 6 out of 10 in that regard, and I think that's just me being a bit generous, really. Now onto the meat and potato of the game, the gameplay. Oh boy. Gameplay for Babylon's Fall is somewhat interesting, as it's changed from what we've seen like the initial trailers, which everyone should know by now really. The game gives you swords with bow, hammer, and 2 types of rods, energy ball or enchanted one that gives you like buffs and stuff, and you have shields as well, which honestly speaking probably like the most useless thing in this game, honestly. I don't know, maybe if you're playing as a tank it can work, but the way you just shred through enemies and stuff, you don't need shields in this game. Personally, what I run is usually having a sword as my light weapon, a hammer for my heavy weapon, and 2 bows for my spectral weapons in like piercing mode, or I say piercing mode, they have the piercing shot ability or deadly shot, one of those 2. Split shot is kinda okay, but you know, when you see how good piercing shot is, you just cannot go back towards like the other types of bows in the game. Sometimes I use energy rods, but very rarely. They do cause knockback, which is good for like certain enemies, but you know, it's only if I'm like just messing around or something. Shields, non-existent. Enchanted rods, non-existent for me as well. But I guess that's like one of the main points of this game, is that you can just mix and match to your playstyle. But obviously if you're doing like end game farming and all that stuff, you're probably gonna run the same set as like most other people. What's funny enough is that in the main game you're literally just stuck with one set of combos to do, but then when you finish the game you just talk to some random NPC that says, oh yeah, here's like 2 other modes that you can use while fighting. I'm just like, why was this not in the original, like not like the original game, but like in the story itself, you know? These 2 extra modes are technical mode and power mode, so you can probably guess by the names of it. Power mode is basically you dealing like more damage, but at the same time it consumes more SP. The combos from that mode are more or less still the same as standard mode, just like with a heavier force in a sense. It's good for actually like hammers though. They actually get an extra move and they get an extra charge move as well. Technical mode is where you would see like a lot of combos for the game. So this mode is really good with swords and bows as with spectral weapons. So you can do like, for example, square, triangle, and then like there's like a little flash that will happen on your character that indicates that you can use your spectral weapons to like shoot out like whatever it is. So it could be for bows, it'll just shoot out a bunch of arrows and pretty much kill the enemy instantly. Hammer will come down quick, sword will come out quick. Same thing with like rods, shields. I really played around with it, but yeah, no, I don't think anyone's really gonna care for shields at this point. With all that being said, to be honest, you know, at the end of the day, you're still just gonna really be like doing the same combos here and there, especially like when you're just facing like your typical mobs. When it comes to bosses, half the time you can't even get off some of your combos because they're either like doing a move itself, or they're teleporting away, or something else just hits you off screen. So yeah, while it's nice, it is there and it can be done from time to time. Most times I honestly think not many people would really like do half of these combos. Maybe they might do in like certain bosses, but most times you probably won't get it off half the time, especially if you're playing like with 4 people that are like running end game content, because literally these enemies will just die within like seconds half the time. One more point to add into the gameplay is that certain equipment in this game can actually give you like abilities. Now I've only managed to get 1 so far, and I don't know if there's going to be more added into the game, because currently right now I'm like max power level and everything, and I've only managed to only get this 1 thing. But it's basically, the move works as like Dante's Stinger from Devil May Cry, except that you use your hand. It basically allows you to close in on the enemy, push them back onto the ground, and then you could like still continue your combos and stuff, which I think it was a nice add to the game, and I add to the gameplay itself to make it a bit somewhat refreshing. But if that's the only thing that's in the game, I won't lie, I'll be very disappointed. Hopefully that's not the case. Maybe someone can like comment down below and see if they got a different type of ability or anything. But you know, maybe they should actually do more of this just to like freshen up and stuff for future content really. But yeah, with this game you can literally just, there's so much stuff when it comes to combat, like in terms of abilities and stuff. Like you have abilities to slow down time, poison enemies, slow down time again, but this is like when you use a potion to heal yourself, so that's good for safe like in a tight spot or anything. So yeah, there's a decent amount of fair abilities. I think there'll be more added in later on in the game. I won't lie though, there's actually like some abilities in the game that are like quite questionable as to why they're even in the game, and it's not the fact that they're broken, it's just the fact they're like really shit, you know, and it's like a thing that you really do not want on your set, more or less, which kind of ties into my next point. So weapons in this game can have like a slight variation into how they work. So usually these weapons don't work as intended. Like sword, you just slash, hammer, you can basically do knockdowns for like the majority of enemies to the point where they just never get back up, and they're really good for short enemies as well. Bows shoot out normally when you, especially like when you charge them or anything. Same with energy rods and everything. But to get to my point, there are some times you can get a weapon with an ability called like snipe on it, or I can't remember the other name for the other one. I'll probably put it down somewhere like on the screen or anything when I remember it. But yeah, it basically allows you to go into a snipe mode in a sense for these weapons. So you can do it for sword, which basically like shoots a slash across the screen, so you can hit like multiple enemies. With a hammer, you can basically keep hold of like certain enemies down easily. Obviously it drains a lot of SP, but you know, it's good for say if someone that's like wants to play a range based character. But I think the thing with these ones is that the fact that enemies can just swarm you around easily and just knock you out of it. Bows can have this snipe mode as well, but personally I think it's not the greatest for bows because it's too slow compared to like when you just charge it up normally in your spectral slot and then you literally just kill them in an instant. But it is there to be used, so you know, if you like it, go for it. Personally, me, I'm not the biggest fan of it because it just slows down my play style. But to get these abilities, some of them are like, well, I would say some of them, they're all RNG based on like what you get, especially like when you're crafting and everything. So yeah, if you want something specific, you're gonna have to either grind or continue crafting, which is a lot of mats to be used. With all that said, you know, when it comes to these gameplay styles, obviously it's gonna vary from person to person. Obviously me, I'm more like a rushdown character, in your face and everything, but you know, I appreciate that they actually added in some sort of styles to the game. Maybe, you know, not as effective, but you know, it's there to be used. So I say hopefully in the future, you know, they give us more weapons to use and stuff just to like freshen the game up, give it a bit more life so it doesn't become stale to the point where it's like, oh, everyone's just running the same thing when it comes to end game content pretty much. So for that, I'll give the gameplay a 7 out of 10. Now we come on to like another main point in the game, which is loot, power levels and equipment. Loot in the game works like a typical loot is. Enemy can drop relics ranging from common, uncommon, rare, legendary and divine. Now in the early parts of the game you won't really see past uncommon relics, but when you hit that midpoint range also, I would say it's when you start to see the rares, the legendaries, might even be lucky with a divine. You know, the drop rates for it are pretty generous overall, even with the like item booster and everything which you can get from the game. Don't worry, it's not pay to win, you literally have to use like in-game currency for it. Personally speaking, from my farming experience, I had a decent amount of yield when it came to like legendaries and divines. However, like my friend Javier, who you might have seen streaming the game here and there, he seemed to have like some ridiculous luck when it came to the divines, like to the point I think we done like 3 runs and he got 1 each run, and there are other times he was getting it like every odd like run or 2, to the point I was just like, yo, where's my divines? But that's besides the point. You can see that in this game, you know, it's pretty generous to like certain other games, really, in my opinion. Now, speaking of divines, basically how it works in this game is that you can only have one for your weapon and one for your armor slot. So I guess that's a way to say, you know, they don't want legendaries to basically become like non-existent for players, really. And I get that point, you know, because everyone at the point is just gonna farm for divines and just put everything on and just be like stupidly overpowered. Moving on, we're going on to like power levels and equipment. So power levels work similar to Destiny, meaning that if you have better gear, you can run the higher end tier like levels and stuff in this game. And when it comes to like the lower tier levels and you're still high level, you pretty much just shred through anything regardless. But that's beside the point. Anyway, as I said, the current max is 150, which is probably like a good point for the game really at this point. I managed to reach this around 40 plus hours game time, and that's with me playing the demo a bit. I know some people grinded the demo for like 20 plus hours, but me, I just played the demo for a bit and that was it. This is like where you're gonna have to start farming certain levels and stuff. So I was farming from, say, like literally from when I finished the game, I was farming a siege, a level 70 siege, which can give you seals which allow you to exchange for legendary relics at the trading shop. So I was doing that for like, I don't know, we've done it for like 2-3 days, I think like 2 days. Then we could see it wasn't dropping as much or like as higher gear stuff as well. So we did decide to move to the 110 one, and that started to give us like better yields and stuff. But at the same time, if you want higher like level equipment, you always have to equip something that's like better than what you have already. So even if you don't want to use those weapons and stuff, what we'd usually do is just equip whatever's the highest, regardless of stats or whatever. Go trade in our seals or whatever, get our legendary relics, and then just open it and then like hope for the best pretty much. Now you can run these siege like basically on your ones really, but I advise to at least have a second person just to speed it up. Or if you're in a group, you can pretty much do these sieges within like what 2 to 3 minutes max really. Some of them are like really easy, especially if you're running like certain gear, then you know you can get these done out of the way, and it allows you to just basically farm even faster pretty much. But it is possible to do it by yourself, which I've done a bit, but it's not as fun and it is time consuming. Now speaking of equipment obviously will play a pivotal part in the game and how you like handle certain missions. At this current time, there are only 3 elements in the game, which are fire, ice and electric, but apparently there might be like 2 more coming in later on. I don't know how it's gonna work, but we shall see. So in the game you have like hubs where you can you have a hub and you can select which area you can go and do these missions. So there are like 3 areas in the game which are fire, ice and electric, and it will usually tell you that in this area, say for example the fire area, which is like a volcano area, that enemies are also going to be more resistant to fire type weapons, meaning that if you have a fire type weapon you're going to do less damage, although technically you could just still go in it regardless, and that you would want an ice weapon as it will be weaker against it. So obviously if you want to play optimal, you'll sort out your set to the point where all your weapons are like, I have an ice element towards it, and that your armor basically has more fire resistance, and that can be same said for the blizzard area, the ice area and the electric area. Funny enough, the electric area, the enemies are weak to it, but at the same time you can be weak to it as well, so you want to obviously have, you know, high electric resistance. Do take in mind that if you are trying to do high level missions, you can do them at a semi like lower power level. So I remember I'd done like a mission that was I think 132 power level and I was 127. It is possible, but you probably won't do as much damage, but it'll definitely help, as I said, if you're playing like in a duo at least. You know, if you're playing like 3 other 4 people, then honestly it don't really matter, because you can just all deal the same amount of damage to just kill the enemies. But it's not like the beta that came out some time ago on PC, where if you were a lower level and you went into the dungeon, you'll basically be doing 1 damage, which I honestly thought was just stupid, because at that point it's just like, what am I here for? Like literally me being like a level 2 under and I'm doing 1 damage is like very unfair. So I do give them props for changing that, because if that was in the full game, I'm pretty sure everyone probably just blasted for being like so stupid. But yeah, overall for like looting and the equipment and like how you can mix and match and everything, I'll give it like an 8 out of 10. Like I enjoyed grinding for the most part, but now it's obviously starting to get a bit stale. So hopefully they do, you know, well, not even hopefully, next week when the new Warlords come out, we'll see how that goes, and like when they got the other stuff coming out as well, we'll see how the game is there. But for the most part, you know, it's actually a decent experience. Now with all that being said, and honestly I could actually say even more, but I actually had to trim some parts out honestly. I think this is a good point to like wrap it up. So until like the game comes out with more updates and stuff, I might do a follow-on review to say, you know, how's the game right now. But we shall see, you know, if it has become a better game, or if it turns out like another Avengers scenario, which yeah, it's not looking too great at the moment. But you know, fingers crossed. I want to be proven wrong. My final score for the game, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Now, although it has a weak story, and I mean, you know, a pretty weak story, especially at the start, and the characters definitely not being the most interesting characters as well, the gameplay itself I enjoyed. The looting experience, obviously I enjoy grinding, I enjoy all of that. So, you know, if you're like enjoy looted games and everything to the point where you're always grinding and stuff, obviously this is like for you pretty much. Now if you're still on the fence about this game, which I know a lot of people are, I would honestly just say wait for a sale for it, because honestly speaking, the price for the game is very steep for a multi-only player game. And you know, the fact that it still has somewhat microtransactions, although it's really not like pay to win at all really, it's just for like cosmetics and stuff. Yeah, you can see why people can get a bit iffy about it. But yeah, can I recommend the game right now? Only if you really enjoy looter games. If not, I'll say just wait. Honestly, just wait. You know, obviously there's more that can be improved for the game, and I hope they actually do it, because these guys, they said they got like what, a year's worth of content to be doing. So we shall see how the game is in like a year's time. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed the review, you know what to do. If you've got any questions about the game or anything, you know, you can always leave a comment, hit me up on Twitter, and I'll try to answer them. But yeah, I'll see you guys later.